Patio is very cracked. You can see some large cracks and then some smaller cracks in the patio. It's quite old, decades old. Surprisingly, the price to fix this patio to have it basically repoured is quite a lot, many thousands of dollars. So I wanted to fix this thing on a budget. Um, I was able to make this look, in my opinion, a lot better for about $60. Over here, you can see an example of what I'm about to do for the whole patio, where I'm basically going to make this look like um, colored cobbler stone or colored flagstone type things, where I create a lot of different blocks in there so the cracks are not that noticeable. To begin this process, I tape the boundaries. The tape is going to simulate like a faux grout line in between the different blocks. Basically, I'm making an area where we're going to have what's going to look like they're different stones. This tape right here is strapping tape. I actually tried quite a few different tapes and found out which one is best. The product that I use is Rapid Patch multi-purpose concrete repair from Menards. It's about $20 for a 50 pound bag. I used about a bag and a half to do this process. And I also used these Colorfast concrete dyes. They're a pigment that you mix in with the concrete. I used a brick red and a charcoal colored, and I also used the natural concrete color, which is quite white actually. Here I'm spreading the concrete out, both with a squeegee and then finally with a paintbrush. It's important when doing this to do sections and not step in your concrete. And concrete sets really fast, like 15 minutes. 15 minutes, you can already walk on it. And before you put the concrete down, you need to the concrete patch down. You need to wet the concrete so that it adheres. Now, I found that it was very important to not wet the concrete prior to putting the tape on. If you wet the concrete prior to putting the tape on, the tape won't stick. And then also try not to put too much water onto the tape itself because it might loosen and move. Those are little things I figured out along the way. I tried different ways of spreading the concrete, and I tried um, different thicknesses of the concrete, like from a very thicker than peanut butter to a little bit more like a thick syrup. I kept the dye ratio exactly the same, so I used 3 tablespoons of the dye per 2 cups of the concrete. And this concrete sets really fast, so you make up small batches to do 1 or 2 of these squares at a time, and then make up another batch to do the next squares and so on. What I actually found was very interesting is that different amounts of water that you add to the concrete, so the different thickness of the concrete, um, if you added less water, you actually got a much more vivid end color than if you made the concrete more runny, even though the dye was exactly the same amount. So going forward, once I figured that out, I prefer to have the concrete quite thick um, because the dye color was much more intense, especially for the red. Not as much for the charcoal color. The charcoal color didn't seem to matter as much. Um, so what worked pretty well, well, I started with a squeegee in the beginning. What I did is made the concrete thicker, and then spread it with a little trowel at first to kind of cover the general area, and then use the paintbrush to paint it in and make it look right. As a final touch on most of the blocks, I would paint in a consistent line so that um, the blocks look like this. They were like stones with a sort of a grain in them. That tended to look better than to just make it completely random. And then you'll be able to see really clearly how different in red color I have. So again, the red color seemed to be changed the most by how thick you made the concrete. Like exactly the same amount of concrete and exactly the same amount of dye. Only difference is the amount of water changed the outcome of the color a lot. And it's actually hard. Each each patch should be made with only one prep of prep of the concrete because somehow each batch looks just a little bit different color, so it won't really look right if you have half of it done with one batch of concrete and another half done with another batch of concrete. It's not really a problem because as you see here, I'm doing pretty small patches at a time. I'm doing just approximately 2 cups um, of, of concrete batches at a time. At some point I got smart and or I got, or maybe less dumb, and that I started putting a cardboard down so my knees weren't hurt so much by uh, having your knees on concrete all day long. Here I'm trying electric tape. You know, I wasn't satisfied with the various tapes that I tried, so I tried a few different ones. Had problems with them not always sticking is the main problem. When they get wet, they wouldn't all stick. And initially, I thought strapping tape would be necessary because it's fiber reinforced, and I thought maybe once the concrete's set, it would be hard to get the tape out of it. I have some spectators that pass through occasionally, if you can notice. Surprisingly, only at one point did I actually get some paw marks into the wet concrete. You can see the dry blocks here. The concrete, the natural color of it is really quite white. And these are the 4 different tapes that I tried. I tried strapping tape, duct tape, plain old masking tape, and electric tape. Most of my project I did with strapping tape, but after trying the 4 tapes, I would only use masking tape in the future. Just plain old masking tape. It was the cheapest one. It actually worked the best. Um, it gave the best looking grout lines, and there was no problem to pull it up once the concrete had set. I tried not to paint too much onto the tape. I mean, I definitely got concrete, colored concrete onto the tape. And my goal was to be, you know, just like when you would paint inside in the house to minimize them slopping too much stuff onto the tape because you could get some bleed underneath of it. I didn't want color bleeding underneath. Um, The reason I move around a lot across the patio is I let one area dry, um, and I can work in a new area where I can stand without messing up my previous work. You can use either a hose or a spray bottle to wet down the concrete. I think as I got going, it was easier to just use the spray bottle than to drag the hose all over the place. I did this multiple times in the day. I found which was also recommended is it's not going to be really good to do this if it's really hot out in the middle of a hot summer day. Better to do this when the concrete is um, not super hot because it just dries way too fast. You won't have time to brush it and get it all looking neat before it already sets. Like I mentioned, I used Rapid Patch multi-purpose repair from Menards and liquid Colorfast dyes from Menards. I'll put a link in the description to those products. That concrete patch stuff, it can be used to a feather's edge, so you can make it as thin as you want. They have other colors than red and charcoal as well. I just chose to go with the three color. And that worked all right. And you can see here I'm pulling up the tape, and the tape pulls up very easily. Here I had a little bit of splash from one of the blocks onto the white, and so I try to fix that with some new plain concrete, and you can see my new plain concrete is a different color than the previous white concrete. So every batch is a little different color. You're gonna have to make one batch for the whole thing. Anyway, I went back and fixed that whole block. Here's the final product. Um, in my opinion, it looks a lot better than it did previously. The cracks are still there, but now they look they don't look as noticeable because you have so many different sort of blocks. Make it hard to notice the flaws in this concrete patio. The best part of it all is that this thing cost me about $60 as opposed to about $6,000 to get the thing repoured. Right now I'm showing it before I put the final sealer on it. I used an Olympic sealer, and I'll put a link for that in the description as well. That block is still drying. Somehow my cats seem to like it more now that it's resurfaced.